and welcome to the webinar From the Complexity of SAS to the Simplicity of Alteryx. A few notes before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and the link will be available to you all before the end of the week. And additionally, we will be opening up the last few minutes of the webinar for questions, so feel free to go ahead and submit your questions in the Q&A panel as we go along. A few introductions. My name is Rachel Mason. I'm the marketing specialist here at Teknion, and Teknion Data Solutions is happy to be hosting this webinar. Leading today's webinar is Teknion Data Scientist, Dr. J. Kyle Roberts, and so I'll just hand it off to Kyle to get us started.
All right, thanks, Rachel. Hey, I'm excited to meet with y'all once again to do another webinar. Teknion's committed to doing quite a few webinars just for helping further the community of thought, especially for myself around data science, but we also do this for other thought areas also. But today I wanted to, because we get asked this question a lot when we are in talking specifically about data science, and then also data prep, and even more recently doing ETL type work of really how good is Alteryx, and like when compared to SAS or compared to R or Python or SPSS or something like that. And so the design of today is to really give you an insight. Really, this is more here's what Alteryx can do and the excitement that we have around Alteryx. And then at the very end, I want to talk about what I perceive as a few of the pain points that you might have when using enterprise solutions such as SAS, or maybe even if you're an R shop or something like that, I'll even speak to those, or a Python shop. I'm going to speak to those at the very end. But wanted to give you just a little bit of my background, because I think this is going to be helpful in understanding why I want to give something like this, a talk like this. And the first is that I was formerly a professor at Southern Methodist University before joining Teknion, and before that I was doing research at Baylor College of Medicine, and then also a professor at University of North Texas. And so this started about in, I believe, 99 is when I started with Baylor College of Medicine, and then did some work at all three of these universities. But the thought is that I think statistical techniques and thought and data blending and things like that, the theory had outpaced what was available to us with the modern architecture. But as that started to grow, and we started to see things like S+ and R and SAS start to become more and more consistently, and then programs like Stata, they started to appear and be used a lot more. I think the difficulty always is that I spent so much time in the classroom teaching graduate level stats, of teaching my students actually how to use the product, that took up just a ton of time. And whereas the self-service really necessarily wasn't there, because I had to spend as much time in a lab teaching them how to use the product as I did actually statistical theory and things like that. And so there was always this high level of frustration for me. And I didn't start using Alteryx until I joined Teknion a few years ago. And at first I was, well, okay, that's nice and that's neat. And, okay, that's great. It's GUI. And being a data scientist, as all data scientists are, we tend to be rather worrisome about anything that is kind of what you see is what you get, but was quickly won over by the things that I saw on Alteryx. And so I kind of want to demo those things for you today. Here's the reason I made the switch. And also, just to give you a little bit more about my background, I am really entrenched in R. So I co-authored the Y-Hat package, and again, you can follow the link there if you wanted to see that is currently available on CRAN. That does a lot for the extension into regression. But then also, and I think this is, went too far, this is exceptionally relevant here. A lot of the publications that I used to do were actually centered around, okay, the pros and cons of using different software options for doing different types of analyses. And so, for example, you can see that first one, software options for multi-level models, in a book written by Ann O'Connell and Betsy McCoach. And then others, software programs for estimating multi-level measurement model parameters, and then also that bottom one there, bootstrapping within the multi-level framework. And so that one was for using with SAS and S+, or could be thought of as R. And so again, this is where I focused a lot of my research, is really kind of talking about the pros and cons of different software options for being able to really not only run analyses, but also the usability the feasibility, because my concern is always, as a data scientist, is I can develop a really cool tool, but if I can't pass it off to someone else so that they can start using it, it's really no use at all. And so that was part of the reason behind authoring the Y-Hat package, is because we had a lot of really complicated stuff that we were doing, and it made sense to package that up in a single function for everyone else to be able to use. So that's kind of the impetus behind that line of research, but then also behind what the reason I wanted to have this this discussion today. And so I want to talk first just a little bit about Alteryx and Gartner. And if you know, just a few days ago, Gartner released their new Magic Quadrant, which you can see over here on the right. It's freely available through a number of resources, or if you have a subscription to Gartner, you can actually download this. But here is the interesting thing to me, is how quickly not only Alteryx appeared on this map, but has moved rapidly. Gartner even saying that Alteryx possesses the ability to make hard things easy. I love things that I love it when hard things are made easy, because really I see that as part of my job, is to make the hard things easy, and that they're consistently being recognized as making some of the biggest jumps in the Magic Quadrant here. But I liked this comment, and this will be interesting, because the reason I brought this out from Datanami is because this comment was made in 2018. And I think that, in my opinion, Alteryx has actually listened to their critics and has moved a lot on this. So this quote there at the bottom bullet is, drawbacks of the firm include a perception that Alteryx is just for data preparation. And they even noted it's not. And I would be the first to say that Alteryx is way beyond data preparation. And even those of you that know Alteryx from the beginning, I mean, even in the name, Alter Y-X, is that a lot of people think, well, Alteryx is just even a tool for doing geospatial analysis. And again, as I would agree with Datanami, it's not. But they also did kind of poke at Alteryx and say enterprise readiness, we're not quite there. This is the area that I would argue that has made leaps and bounds in the last couple of years, where Alteryx is really ready, moving into an enterprise readiness state. And again, why now it's a very common that I recommend this to our customers, or recommend this to people I'm working with, is because not only is it enterprise ready, it's easy to use, it's easy to pass off, it's easy to make functional. And then some of the other things that we're going to talk about later too, that may be some of your pain points when using other software, they've made really transparent about pricing and about the functionality and add-ons and things like that, and then also the upgrades. And so we're going to get to that at the end. I'll deal with those, but I want to talk about, now I love pictures. And so if we're thinking about Alteryx as a solution, this is the way I like to think. Now, I'm a car guy, and I especially like working with cars that I can do a lot with. Like I'm a car guy, but I'm not a Ferrari guy. I'm a car guy that likes especially getting older cars and then doing things to them. And so I want you to not think about Alteryx as a Ferrari or a Mercedes. Here's what I want you to think about it as let's say an old C10 pickup. And I know that may not be a very flattering thing, and if some Alteryx people are on, I hope they'll please forgive me for this analogy, but I think it's a great analogy. In an old C10 pickup, and if you've ever worked on one of these pickups, when you pop the hood, there's so much room in there. And the engineers who originally built this pickup really thought a lot about, hey, we're not necessarily able to think about all of the things that someone may want to put under the hood, but we're going to leave them a ton of room and the ability to be able to do that. And so if I have an old C10, well, I can turn it into a number of things here. This top picture is a very famous drag racing truck called Farm Truck. And so some of you may have seen this online, seen episodes of this on a racing show that's currently online, or even the one on the bottom is actually one that's meant to pull really heavy loads in a really short distance. And so this is why I like this analogy. I like to think of Alteryx as being the C10 truck that I can pretty much do anything I want with it. Meaning, if I want to turn this thing into one of the fastest cars out there, I can do this, because Alteryx was smart enough to know that they couldn't think of everything, but they left you all the tools in there to be able to think of everything. So, for example, someone may have purchased just Alteryx just to do data blending, but then all of a sudden they want to make the jump into prescriptive analytics. Alteryx is smart enough to not only provide some ready-made tools, but then also provide a tool that lets you fashion your own predictive tools that maybe they didn't think of. Okay, we may want to use this. Not only do we want to do something like really complicated like discriminant analysis, but we may want to do even predictive discriminant analysis. It's very hard to do, but Alteryx left the tools in place where you can actually do that. Or maybe you want to pull really heavy loads, meaning you want to process a ton of data all at once and be able to use Alteryx as an ETL tool. It does do this. And in fact, I have a number of customers that will actually use this for ETL and for pushing data into and out of warehouses. Doing transformations of it, setting it back up in there. It actually works really good with this. I even have a current customer who's using this with some third-party applications like Moody's in order to do this. And so Alteryx is handling all the data wrangling, negotiating with Moody's, bringing it back, pushing the data out, bringing it back in, making sure it's in the right format, and then pushing it out to their data warehouse. Really, really powerful tool. And so I like this analogy because this is how I think of Alteryx as it's almost like the framers of the Constitution. Okay, here's your rough skeleton, and then we're going to leave you the ability to kind of put the fill in little areas that maybe you want to fill in, but we necessarily didn't think of ahead of time to do this. But then pushing that out is made really, really easy. Okay, so having said that, I think what makes the most sense is that for us to immediately go into, let me just talk a little about Alteryx and all these things that I've mentioned before. We can actually do these things real time because I want you to see the ease and the ability to use this, and then we'll talk about and I'm sure it will come up as we go through that somebody say, hey, there's a pain point, and I see how Alteryx is answering that. And so again, and if you do have questions, we'll try to get to those at the end if we do have time. If not, I'll try to email you responses for that. So I'm going to stop the slideshow now, and then I'm going to pull up Alteryx. And the first thing we're going to do is just talk about how can Alteryx handle easily blending of data and just kind of the types of things that we would think normally. So what I have here are just two small data sets that I've created. We can see them referenced down here. They have an ID variable, and then we have this variable I'm just calling column A. So in the first data set, we have IDs A, B, and C. But then in the second variable, we have ID in column B, and we have in that one A, B, C, and D. So we see actually in the second column or the second data set, we have one more record than we do originally in the first. And so joining these is as simple as me pulling in a join tool, connecting both of the data sets to this, and then telling Alteryx, okay, I want to join by the ID variable, and then it'll automatically look into the right side and see, all right, there's an ID variable there. I don't want it duplicated, so I'm going to take it out, and then I would just click over here and let this thing run. And you'll see that what Alteryx is going to do is give us a really quick output of here in the middle join, and you can see on the left here are the different types of joins we could do. In the middle join, that's the ones of the IDs that we were able to match up, A, B, C, and D. Now they have scores for column A and column B. And then, but you may be saying, okay, well, maybe I want to include everybody in there, regardless of whether or not they appeared in both data sets. Well, again, that's just really simple of pulling a union tool in here and then unioning by both the inner join and then the right join, and then running that analysis yet again. And now we have everybody in my data set who appears there, who appears in either data set, regardless of whether or not they appear in both at the same time. So now we have that complete data set. Okay, so that's just a really quick demo of kind of one of the things that Alteryx is famous for, is that, man, it really handles data well. But let's suppose you're looking at this and you're saying, hey, Kyle, that's nice and all, but really what I would like to do is get a column sum, a new variable that's a column sum on here. And I'm going to show you how to do this, because then I'm going to show off how powerful Alteryx really is. So I'm going to go to these transform tools, and then I'm going to transpose the data, which is really just taking columns and turning them into rows. And so as I pull that in, I'm going to say, all right, my data is contained in column A and column B, and then the key columns is this ID variable. And then after that is done, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull in a summarize tool. And then based on ID, I'm going to group all my responses by ID, and then this value. Now what I'm going to do is actually compute the sum of that. And then after that is done, now I'm going to join this information back into the original data set. And we'll join it by the ID variable. Okay, so let me define that as ID. Now that that's done, I'll go ahead and hit run over here. And then we'll see that now what Alteryx is doing is it's going to give me a data set that now has a, oh, I forgot to turn off that right ID, but that's okay. That now has the sum of these two columns out here. Okay, now again, now why did I show you this? This is something really, really simple. Okay, the purpose of me showing you this is because this whole process here, this idea of kind of the blending and then also what's computing the row sums, this whole process can actually be made a lot smaller. And this is done by using either we could do apps or we could do macros. In this case, we're going to build a macro and I already have it built out here for us, but we're going to build a macro that says, hey, okay, take any input that we have on our data set. And then what we're going to do is that same process that we saw before, that we're going to, we're going to transpose the data down, and then we're going to compute the row sums of it, and then we're going to join it back into the original data set, and then we're going to output that. We're going to make this a macro. So what I've done in Alteryx is I've actually saved this as a different file format, so this YXMC, that makes it a macro. And now here's the great thing about this, is if I'm going to be using this same form or this same function a whole bunch of times over and over, now what I can do is, since that saves as a macro, let's say I have a new data set that I'm looking at. So here's my new data set. And, okay, so I've got X1 and X2. Because I've made that macro, now I can insert the macro that I've created into my data set. And what this will do is every time it appears in my workflow, and every time this appears in my workflow, it will reference back to this macro that we created over here. And then I'll just add a browse on the end of that. We will run it. And now what I've done is I've taken a process that is actually, let's look at that, 1, 2, 3, 4 steps long, and reduced it into just a single step. Okay. Now, so you may be asking yourself, okay, yeah, that's great. You just took 4 down into 1. But the reason I wanted to show you this is because when we are doing an analysis like this, it makes sense to be able to put stuff together that maybe the rest of our users can't use. So let's think about it in the things that I do, like in data science. One of the difficulties is that I may build out for someone an incredibly complicated macro, incredibly complicated workflow. And the problem is that I don't want them to mess with the workflow, because I know that if anyone makes any small change to anything in this process, that it will not work. And so let's say I wanted them to use this procedure here, and so people are copying and pasting this and then putting it different places in their workflow, then they may copy and paste it wrong or connect it incorrectly. Now I have a foolproof way that I've locked down that I go, okay, now I can give this to everybody in my organization or even outside of the organization. And it gives me the ease and ability to be able to actually run this procedure without having to look at that, without having to actually copy and paste all that other stuff in there. And in fact, so much so that one of the things that we can do is build really, really, really complicated procedures, and we can make them available to people who don't even have Alteryx, but they can, in essence, stand on our shoulders to do some analyses that we have developed that's really difficult to do. So let me give you a really good example of that. This is a data set that I did as a proof of concept for someone. And it's a really, really, really ugly data set. So this is actually data that was coming over from a DB2, and I can show you what this looks like in real life. Okay, here's this real life, really ugly data set that comes to me that looks just like this. And so here are the problems that we encountered in this. I need this entire section right here to just be a single row in my data set. But the problem is that every so often I've got a weird header that appears here. And so it repeats itself here. And there's a weird, funny special character that's right at the beginning of each of these that's like a carriage return for noticing a new page. The other problem I have is that in my data set, some of my entries have three different address lines, and some of them have 4. So you see John Doe coming all the way down to there's their address. And again, this is all fake data. This isn't real data. And then we have Jane Doe, who Jane only has 3 rows of data in her data, in her address. So what we have to do is we have to build a procedure that basically scrapes all of this data, puts it in a format that's actually usable to us. And so I took this data set for our customer and then built this really big workflow that does all of what we're talking about here. So I will run this and I'll show you the output just to show you, yep, indeed, Alteryx can do some really great things when it comes to parsing data. And so as this finishes up, we'll see down here on the end, there's our gorgeous, and you can see at the bottom of it, there's our gorgeous data set that is now all parsed with a single row representing every case. And then you'll see also John Doe, yep, he has an address 1, address 2, and address 3, whereas Jane Doe just has address 1 and address 3. We don't have that address 2. Able to plot the timestamp, everything associated with that account in this procedure. So now this is a really difficult procedure to do. It took us, this is probably about a 7 or 8 hour exercise for us to be able to get this all together because it's not that straightforward. But so now here's the problem with that. Yes, we can do this, and yes, so someone pulling in data set that looks like this, constantly remembering to point to your new data set and then actually have this thing run, and then making sure that no one accidentally clicks on one of these and then moves something somewhere else. Again, we needed to lock it down. So in this case, it made a lot of sense for us to make an app. And this was a pretty simple procedure. So here is, if you notice, this is the workflow here. Here's the app that we created that has a input tool inside of our interface where someone can select a file format and then has an output tool that actually just creates a new database for them called results database. Okay, so this is great. Now, what are we going to do with this? Well, again, Alteryx was really smart in thinking ahead about this, about, hey, you may not everyone at your where you're located may actually have Alteryx loaded on their own machine, but we have our server out somewhere. But we still need everybody to be able to use this. And I think one of the scourges, especially of a data scientist or someone who's in charge of all your data wrangling at your place of work, is that every time someone needs this run, is that they have to send the data file to you. You have to run it. You have to send it back. You have to worry about, okay, did I send them the right data file? Is it the one that's most updated? All right, so this is where we're going to enter into gallery. And this is one of my favorite things about Alteryx. And so what I've created here is this is on our Teknion website. This is my own personal gallery where now that workflow that I put together before that made an app appears right here in this data parse final app. And what I'm now going to allow someone to do is they can navigate to this site without having Alteryx on their own local machine. And then they can run where I say, hey, give me a DB2 formatted file. They browse to their file, which is this one right here. They browse to their file and then they run this. And now there's their results, and all they have to do is download it, and they can just select the type of download file they would want. You know, if they want it as a CSV or DBF, or if they just want to result this in this YXDB. Now they can do this themselves. I, as the data scientist, am now I don't have to worry about being inside the loop, and I don't have to worry about them messing up a procedure that I've developed, a long series of code. Now, when I was writing stuff into SAS and R, this was huge for me, because although I send someone a series of code and I put comments in there, someone always messes it up. And that's, I think the joke used to be that when you make something idiot-proof, they make a better idiot. And so that we would have that problem all the time of okay, I've developed your procedures, here they are, I've tried to lock them down as much as I can, but somehow, somewhere, someone would enter something that would, or put a comma in there somewhere, or actually just, I couldn't get it locked down quite good enough. And as a result of not being able to get it locked down quite good enough, I had that problem of constantly having to babysit this procedure that I put together. And I hate babysitting stuff because really, that's as many of you well know at your organization, when you are paying for this development, especially for someone like a data scientist, the data scientists don't come cheap. And so you want them to spend time working on the hard things within your organization, not things like this. So now I can put these things up on Gallery. All someone has to do is just point to a file, or they can point to some hard procedures inside there. And then I can actually load that up for them, show them where it is, and then say, all right, all you have to do is go here. It's all self-service. It frees me up to be able to work on the things that really, really are hard. And they don't have to know anything about Alteryx to use this. Just like what part of my frustration was, is I always had to do a little bit of a primer inside of SAS or R or S plus back in the day to teach someone how to use these things. And so now you don't need to know anything other than, hey, here's the web address. Go ahead and this is where you get your results, or this is where you load in your file and it will send you your results. And I could even have this set up as instead of actually having it appear right here, I could have this file actually emailed to them. And again, with long procedures and stuff that is really complicated, then not only can I have the procedure inside here, but then I can have it send them an email and say, Alteryx will say, okay, hey, we're done processing that file. So maybe things are having to work overnight because you have just a load of terabytes of data, or maybe not terabytes, but gigabytes of data that you're having to analyze and then give a result on. So then you'll get notification when that's run. Okay. So having said that, I wanted to show one more thing that I think this also shows how outstanding Alteryx is. And then as I pointed to before, this really shows off how Alteryx is that C10 pickup that we can, if we want to make it a drag racer, we can. Okay, so one of the problems that we encountered when we first started using Alteryx is the predictive tools in here are really, really good predictive tools. They're all based on R, but there are times that we don't want all of the reports that are generated inside here. Maybe we just want one small piece of this. And recognizing that one small piece that we may pull in on this linear regression tool, we can necessarily hack that out. And so I wanted to show you, I'm not actually going to run this, but I wanted to show you this for this purpose, is that Alteryx is really big on, hey, we want to show you everything we've done and we want to give you the ability to work with it. So if I'm pulling in this linear regression tool and I right click on this, then I can open this macro. And the cool thing, again, about the developers of Alteryx is they went ahead and thought about, you know what, let's give them access to the whole thing. Let's give them access to absolutely everything that's inside of here. And so if you see over here on the left, there's your initial input. And then this is the entire procedure that Alteryx uses to generate that linear regression. And I can pull, again, out of this, if I go, look, I don't need these reports here. Those are something I can kill those. Save as my new tool and start to really open up. And again, too, I think this is a great level of vulnerability by the developers of Alteryx to be able to say, look, if you don't like necessarily the way that we thought this should be presented, you can hack this, not hack this, that's a terrible word. You can actually reuse parts of this for your own purposes, okay? So as we were thinking about that, we're going, one of the things that's missing from the R tool is some special things that we like, something called communality coefficients, structure coefficients. And then the other thing is we wanted to provide in here a way for Alteryx to actually let me know, hey, are there outliers in my data? And so we developed our own tool. Oops, sorry, let me grab it real quick. I'm having to move my, there we go. We developed our own tool, and the great part about it is now everyone who wants it, we developed the tool and freely made it available. And now we have an area here called Teknion, where here's a couple. We developed our own k-means tool. We developed a y-hat regression tool. So now what our tool will do is it will come in and it will run multiple regression. I'll just select all of these variables, and then just like Alteryx does, but it gives us some more information that we thought, for the type of analysis that we run, it makes more sense to include some of these extra things in here that help us understand a little bit more about the data, because generally when we do a regression type analysis, we're asked to do a little bit some more deeper dives on some of these things. And so we can, again, actually just pull in the tool, let this run if we want, and then we'll see our output. Or if it really made a difference to us, what we can do is now we can take that tool and then go and turn it into an app. And here's our app that appears in my Teknion gallery. There's the app, and now I can allow someone to actually run this again. And let me choose the file here real quick. I can allow someone to do the same thing that we were going to do inside of Alteryx, but now I'm going to run it on the server, and they don't even need Alteryx in order to run this really, really complicated regression tool that we have done. So we can go back and forth, that we'll see the output here in these terms, and that here's this final piece that we really need some help with identifying outliers and why they're there and where they're there. And so here's some of the information that we would need for that. But again, we developed our own tool on this. We made this freely available, like most tools that are developed inside of Alteryx. We made this freely available, and then even to, if you wanted to hack our tool even more, you could do that here. Now, what you didn't hear happening was, because I know all of you are muted, is that many of the data scientists out there are going just like me, just saying, oh my goodness, thank you so much. This is a really easy way to do some really complicated things and then make it useful for everyone inside of the organization. And we don't have to worry about, again, that problem of, okay, what happens if someone happens to click the wrong place, or they happen to pull in, they didn't copy and paste everything just correctly in. Again, if I wanted, I could completely lock this down so no one can mess with it, but I decided, you know what, we're going to leave it open. And then the same thing is happening over here. People can run this online. So if I want to look at, let's say, just the commonalities, or again, that same graph, I can now export that as a PDF so that now they can see this graph themselves. And there's their information to be able to go, hey, I wonder what's happening with person number 64 out here. Why are they so much different, and they're not in line with my normal QQ plot? Okay, all right. So I realize that that's a bit like drinking from a fire hose, but this is just meant to be an overview of kind of, here are the reasons that I would prefer using an analytic tool like this, maybe over a SAS, or maybe over an R, an SPSS, or a Python. Again, too, the work up on the ramp up on this is not steep at all. Again, I can get someone working in Alteryx within an organization really, really quickly, regardless of their level of skill. And where I used to get frustrated with programs like, especially when we're getting into writing, complicated code inside of a SAS or SPSS, or S plus, or even something like Stata. Is that, gosh, passing that stuff off is really, really difficult, and it's somewhat fragile, and that I see all the time that people are breaking it. Okay, all right. So having said that, I think what we want to do is kind of go back to our slides and then talk about a few more things that I think is really important that makes Alteryx really stand out, in my opinion. And this one also is one of the biggest ones there is. Alteryx licensing and pricing is available right on their webpage. And so again, you could follow this from there. I do get frustrated with other platforms that we work with. That is very much it's just difficult to get a price from someone on really how much it's going to cost. And sometimes it may take a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to figure out, all right, how much really is this going to cost me in the end? Alteryx is straight up front about this. It's available on their website. And then also allows for, and I think this is worth pointing out, that these add-ons here, like the location insights data sets, like if we want to pull in census data, or maybe we want to pull in Dun and Bradstreet data. Okay, so these things are available to you through Alteryx, and Alteryx does an amazing job of being able to integrate with those to grab information about your own customers and then pull that information in an easy and usable way. And remember too, Alteryx, is that alter YX, is that because a lot of the times when we're doing analysis and you're starting to grab that information and then you need to put it into a geospatial realm, this Alteryx is optimized for this. And so I think this is really straightforward, is really good. So if someone, if you are thinking about, I'm going to send you that page because there's a lot of different things on pricing, especially like if you're going to server and if you want to do promote or connect, which is, we may do another webinar someday to talk about those. I think that's beyond the scope of today in talking about those things. But then I want to talk about each of these, and that there is a real genuine sense in which Alteryx does relieve a lot of the pain points that I was seeing previously. And so some of these are more than significant pain points. And so I think the first is that Alteryx, as we just mentioned, it does have upfront pricing. And so going in, okay, here's how much it's going to cost in order to be able to fully deploy everything. Now, how many you need, I mean, that's, again, that may be so sometimes we recommend if someone is going to get a server, and let's say you're a bank, then it may make sense to not only get a production server, but also get a testing server in order or a sandbox server in order to try out those ideas for development before we push them out into production. But then again, right going in, okay, this is the cost of 2 of those. The second is a straightforward deployment. The idea that when we push these things out them out to my collections area where I have a couple of things we've done, that we have our Y hat is out there. We also have our data parse tool can actually be done through the website, where again, all someone has to do is just enter in that data, okay? Enter in that data, and they can either do it through Alteryx or through this. It's easy to do, and it's easy for me to give everyone access to this. The other great thing is that now, if I want to, I can start to schedule these things. And so if I have data coming into my, let's say, my warehouse every night, and I need to do some transformation and loading, I can have this, when everyone's away, at 1 a.m., start this and run it. And it's literally as simple as just saying, all right, I'm going to schedule, here's the one I'm going to schedule next. And, I'm going to put up the schedules for some of these workflows that I have in my collections here. And different people will have different access, levels of access for those. And so, and it's really, really straightforward, really, really easy to do, okay? Next, so spatial analytics and data science functionality to me is huge. I think of Alteryx, and this is something we haven't even talked on at all. Alteryx is being one of, if not the leader in the world right now in spatial analytics. And so incredibly powerful for if we are starting to do spatial stuff. Data science functionality, I'm going to come back to that in just a little bit, but is just suffice it to say, we have the strength and power of both Python and R behind everything we're doing inside of Alteryx. So anything we could do in those areas, we could also do inside of Alteryx. This one is a huge one for me too. Easy installation and seamless upgrades. So I'm going to talk about the first part of that. Installation is really quick. We can get someone stood up on a server in a matter of a few hours. Upgrades usually doesn't even take that long. And so, because we do this for a lot of our customers, that they still ask us just to do it with them. But generally what we find is that after we've shown them how to do it 1 or 2 times, it's so easy to do. The upgrades are seamless, that everything will migrate over. We rarely ever have problems with this. But I like also too on this, there is a consistent release schedule that Alteryx puts out. And they also are really good at saying, hey, here's what's going to be in the next release. And so there are once in a while we'll have customers that will say, hey, I might forego this release and then wait till the next one, just for reasons of not having to update everyone's license and get them onto the newer version. And we go, okay, that's fine. We usually give them, but we also encourage them to, hey, consistently go with these with a release schedule. I would say also related to this, Alteryx has made some great acquires lately, and so I'm not going to speak about all of these, but some of the things that are coming with the newer releases of Alteryx have me really, really excited. That's going to push them, I think, even further in the Gartner quadrant. This is maybe one of the biggest things here. A protected migration for intellectual property. I think one of the struggles is that if you are in SAS or R or Python, is always that worry that you have developed some intellectual property that your maybe apps or macros that your organization uses, and there's a concern about when we go to a new upgrade or a new version of, and so Alteryx has seen its share of pretty significant changes in how the system works. Backwards compatibility is not an issue, whereas in some of these other ones, I really have seen that become an issue. That okay, so we may upgrade to a newer version that especially maybe incorporates a GUI or something like that. There is the guarantee that that will work is not always there in these programs outside of Alteryx, and so whereas you may have to, in some instances, actually continue to stand up two different versions of a platform in order to maintain all of your intellectual property until you can actually rework your let's say macros and apps and or procedures in order to fit the new architecture. This is Alteryx really cares about this, and actually I've talked with senior execs at Alteryx about this very thing, and then no, we are very committed to, if you have something that works right now, it will work 5 years from now. And so now there may be better ways to run it 5 years from now. Well, actually that's always true. But there's not actually this worry that, hey, we have some intellectual property that we've developed inside of here, and now it doesn't work in the new system. That just doesn't happen inside of Alteryx. Okay, so it has all of these things with, and then here's where I'm going to do a little bit more of a deep dive in database processing. And so I want to go back to Alteryx to show you this because this is a huge feature for me. That when I am talking with some of my colleagues that are okay, yeah, hey, we want to do some stuff, but we really want to continue to keep it in database and not have to drag it down and then load it back up. What can we do those processes in database? Alteryx has thought about this, and so now we have all of these tools where we can connect to a database live, and then we can just browse some of the features inside this, or we can do some sort of filters or dynamic outputs, dynamic inputs. We can even manage the data stream in and out there. So we can actually do these macros. We can run them inside the database. This is great. I love being able to do this. And again, too, it's all GUI, so that if there is a procedure that I'm wanting to do, and then someone else wants to come behind me and see what it is that I did, they're not having to decipher code. Everyone knows what a join is. This is just a join done inside the database. And so it's easy to look at that when that appears in my workflow to be able to understand that. So again, this makes me so much more productive when I'm working with someone, because now I'm not having to go back through and explain every nuance of code that I developed for them, because again, everyone understands what a join does. There it is. Whereas if it's written out in code, that may be difficult to decipher. Next, there is a Jupyter notebook, and so all I'm going to do is just say there is a Jupyter notebook that you can use, because I don't want to explain exactly, but that may be, especially your data scientists, when you point them to this, that will be something that would definitely be excited about, because now we can collaborate on things together. This is a really big selling point for me. Because I like to be able to use this to watch processes and procedures and how they develop across time. But the one that I am the most excited about is these integrated R and Python tools. And so I want to show you these things. So I'm just going to do up here a search for these. And so if I just type in R, then you'll see that there's an R tool there. And so now with this R tool, I'm going to go ahead and connect to my data over here. And the reason I want to do this is just to show what happens once that data is seen as coming in. Then I have a frame over here where now I run everything just like I would in R. So I would say, okay, read this input 1 as a data frame. So that's going to read that in. And now anything that I would normally do in R, I can do right here in this area. And then I can output those to any one of these 5 nodes And that's exactly how this Y-hat tool is made, is that what we did is we had this come in, and the first thing that happens is the data that comes in goes into an R tool, and then we start to do a lot of work inside of there. In fact, many of the tools that you see inside of here, and this is really hard to see, but like this nested test in the bottom left corner, that is a little bitty R. And so the naive-Bayes classifier, same thing, logistic regression, linear regression. So a lot of the procedures that are being used, especially for this more of the analytics and predictive analytics, are run inside of R. And some more of them are starting to be run inside of Python. So again, too, if we wanted the same thing, here's our Python tool that we can pull that in, and then we would code inside of Python exactly the same way we would code inside R. Well, not exactly the same way. We would do that actually inside of Python. And so you can see now the Jupyter Notebook is starting to load inside of there. And then, we can pull our data in and then start to run everything that we would normally want to run in Python. We now in here. And here's the great thing about this is that now you have the ease of use of a workflow, and then with the functionality and strength of R and Python. And so conceivably, there's almost nothing you can't do. Oh, that's a good double negative. You can do pretty much everything you can think of because of these tools. And now you're going to be you will make this available, and you're not having to babysit your R code or your Python code, because you can lock that down inside of a macro or inside of an app for everyone else to use. And they're not having to send you data for you to run yourself. This is, again, really big for me. And then finally, really simple scheduling and production. As we talked about that before, we can push these things out to a gallery, pushing them over to production, really, really simple. Scheduling is really simple. And then I also wanted to say that just wanted to show you a couple things, because our website, teknionusa.com, and then in the products area, and I'll go ahead and navigate out to that page. I just wanted you to see this because there's more information here. But then even more so, with many other people too, we develop our own tool sets that we freely give away. And so those things that you saw before, those predictive macros, we've got one for a new k-means cluster tool that we developed, and then here's actually a video on how to use it. We did the same thing for that Y-hat regression tool. Here's a video for how we do it. And then this is great too, because this is also these tools that we've developed. We give them away for free. And then there are also thousands of Alteryx users who give away their tools for free on the Alteryx website. So again, just Googling an Alteryx and going, okay, I need an Alteryx tool that will, let's say, pull out tweets, where I can search tweets and pull them out. There's a tool for that. Someone's developed it and they made it available for free. So the community of users here is just absolutely wonderful. The second thing too is that I did want to show you on our website, if you are interested in possibly getting a free demo version, that link is right here. And so again, Teknion USA Products, Alteryx, or you can just navigate to it by going to software platforms and then navigating to Alteryx on our website. So actually, there it is right there. So that's the same page that we're on. And so that's how you can get a free trial. Or if you're interested in us actually doing a demo for you with your actual data, we are happy to do that as well. And so it looks like we're coming up on the end of our time there. I really wanted to thank you. Wanted to thank you for joining us, and also to give you my email address in case you do have any questions. I think, again, going back to this slide here, that's Alteryx for me has really removed a lot of those pain points. I think as as you're starting to develop repeatable procedures, and as you're starting to do many things inside of your data, Alteryx is absolutely amazing for doing this. And so, it's great for data blending. It will do geospatial. We can do a really difficult predictive analytics because of the R and Python tools and some of the baked in tools that are already there. We have even used this too, and I know this sounds weird, but we did it. We have used this to parse PDF documents. And so we had a company that had some PDFs that were coming out that information needed to be parsed. We're able to do that. We can use it to do ETL. It's just, the tool is amazing. And again, part of the reason amazing is that it's easy to use. It's easy to pass off really difficult stuff that we have done. There is now I have a tool that my entire enterprise can use, as opposed to like if we're using SAS or R or Python, maybe just 6 or 7 people really understand how to use it. Now I've got a tool that everyone at my enterprise can use because it is really simple to drag and drop and then look at our data as a result of that. Or then now, because of the way that Designer works and pushing out to a gallery, now people can piggyback on the work that I've done, and they don't even need a version of Alteryx to do this. And so I think that's why I'm a really big fan of this. And why I was just excited to be able to show you these things today. So if there are, it looks and it seems that there are no questions, but we're excited to be able to present this to you. Again, if you do have any actual personal questions for me, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd be happy to get you pointed in the right direction, or if you want to do a demo, or even, you know, you're wanting to talk about use cases where you're thinking, hey, maybe if you could do a proof of concept for us, we'd be happy to. And also, too, I'll tell you at Teknion, if we don't have the expertise, we have a great relationship with Alteryx. We'll make sure we have the right people on the phone in order to help you on all fronts there. But again, thanks for joining us. We sure do appreciate you taking the time to be on the call.